just to preface, I live in a very conservative area, very rural. Those two things tend to go together. The primary issue that I have, or that I have experienced, is that we are, especially in, the more conservative the district, we are having difficulty with courts applying the law to the facts in a non-politicized fashion. For instance, I personally had a judge in my hearing tell me that the tenant who I was representing should have been evicted a long time ago because the eviction moratorium was unconstitutional. And so the landlord had been worked in injustice by not being able to evict the tenant at an earlier time.
Now, I want to highlight how problematic this is. I'm just going to assume that you were not in front of a Supreme Court justice.
I was not, no.
Right. And so this administrative judge, essentially, or I don't know, what level judge would this be? Just a county judge, maybe?
Yeah, it's just basically the base level circuit judge that you're going to run into in any ordinary kind of issue.
They don't have the ability to rule on the constitutionality of something like this. And the idea that they're expressing an opinion that none of this law should not have existed in the first place should be completely irrelevant to their decision. And if they had even the slightest bit of integrity, wouldn't mention that because it's such a blatant predisposition. You can't say, I think this law is unjust, and therefore I'm going to even be even more punitive to you because it's unjust to the landlord. But what kind of recourse do you have at that point if you're the defendant?
So there is an additional wrinkle to this that I'm sure is just going to please your audience to just tickle them pink. In my particular area, the law regarding evictions requires what's called strict compliance, which means that there is no discretion for the judge to make any decision whatsoever. If there is a violation of the law, then the case can be dismissed. I say can be because most people take advantage of unrepresented people and just evict them on illegal leases and procedure, but that's beside the point. So if there is an error, the case has to be kicked out if someone asks for it to be kicked out. So in this particular instance that I'm relating to you, I did get a motion to dismiss on statutory legal grounds, and the judge hedged a lot and tried to avoid that. Now, what is the recourse in this situation? Unfortunately, the recourse is to set up the appeal so that way when or if the court happens to go against me on this, then I have to appeal it. That's the only option. Which, of course, brings up a whole layer of issues. And another issue is that in my jurisdiction, it is judicial discretion whether or not the court will stay an eviction order or grant it pending an appeal. So even if I go for the appeal, the defendant, the tenant, could still be kicked out of the house while we wait for the appeal to proceed.
So nuts.
Totally nuts. Yeah. And totally nuts.
And how much of your experience do you think is consistent with the experience of other people going through these eviction processes? And do you have any sense of numbers, or are we just can we sew together some anecdotes here, or is there any data on this? I mean, I would imagine everything is so localized that it's hard to sort of get some type of national data on this for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, for hard numbers, it's going to be a minute for people to kind of, test how many cases are going to court, test how successful they are, test what they're winning on. I can tell you right now that I just recently read an article that certain defenses that people have in evictions are being used a lot, but just the court is, well, I shouldn't say the courts, but this particular defense is being ignored frequently. Now, as far as anecdotal evidence is concerned, I am a member of a number of national email chains, and I'm pretty connected to the community around these issues, and it's a problem everywhere, as far as I can tell. All jurisdictions, different states. Now, each state and locality have different process is, of course, with minor variation, but to a large extent, landlords are charging full speed ahead, and basically, if there's no attorney getting slotted in to defend the tenant, there are probably a huge swath of people getting evicted on illegal grounds, either an illegal lease, not following the procedure properly. I'm sure you're aware you're not entitled to an attorney for civil issues. So, I mean, if you can't find a pro bono attorney or some other sort of low-income assistance, there's people all over the place just getting railroaded.
Where do people? And there's I would imagine, particularly in like areas where you're at, like there's no like pro bono type of organizations, are there?
There are. If you're facing an eviction, just look for any legal aid organization in your area will likely be able to help you. As far as I can tell from talking to legal aid attorneys, they're all on high alert and they're on the bleeding edge of this. So if, and there are legal aid agencies all over the country, depending on your population. San Diego, for instance, has, I think, 3 separate legal aid agencies just for San Diego County. So depending on how your population is, you will have access to an agency. Now, I know that in Northern Illinois, there's an organization called Prairie State Legal Institute, Prairie State Legal Services, and they cover the entire half of the state. So it really depends, the entire northern half of the state, and then Chicago Legal Aid covers Cook County alone. So it really depends on your region, but there are legal aid organizations out there that can help. So, if you type legal aid and your area, you're more than likely not going to find something.
Okay, well that's good. Appreciate this update on what's going on with this. It's a real.
Yep, no problem.
All right, appreciate it. I mean, this is the thing about and I think we're within, it's going to be a month or two where we start to see the real big numbers. I mean, I keep reading things about rumblings about how this eviction wave is really more like it's not coming in as a wave as much as it is like sort of like, I don't know, you've seen those images of like a tsunami where all of a sudden the water just sort of pours in, not necessarily in some type of like one dramatic fashion, but just sort of flows in. I think we're going to see a lot of evictions like this, particularly if you have a lot of judges out there in these areas who are like, we should have never had a moratorium in the first place.
Yeah.
And allowing that to implicate their decisions.
I missed that part of the call, but I would guess that there are a lot of judges out there who have like this incredible contempt for poor people. that seeps through.
And the reality is too, is that you're a county judge. I don't know, like your buddies, probably your landlords.
Yeah, exactly. That's
everybody at the club is your landlord. You're playing golf with the judge. They're your landlords or buddies. Maybe you're a landlord.
Even here in New York, the eviction moratorium expires at the end of this year. So there's going to be a flood of evictions starting in 2022.